All right, let's do this. That was pretty good timing for a Sunday afternoon edition of Flames Nation Live. Just minutes after Andrew Mangiapane named MVP at the World Championship, Canada comes from behind to win gold. We go from that to little Pat Steinberg and Ryan Pike on some Flames Nation Live. Hello, Pike. Happy Sunday.
Hi, Pat. And I guess it is a happy Sunday. I mean, what a weird few weeks for Mangiapane. I mean, he finishes off a pretty nice season with, let's be blunt, 4 pretty meaningless games against Vancouver. Hops on a plane solo. He expected to be going with his buddy Dylan Dubé, but Dubé unfortunately suffered a concussion in the final game of the season. So, Mangiapane goes to his first international tournament ever. As he's going through his quarantine, Canada loses their first 3 and looks like they might miss the medal round entirely. And then Mangiapane got plunked on that top line with Adam Henrique and Connor Brown. And then they just went on a crazy run. I think they were undefeated in regulation in all 7 games he played. They won 6 of 7. They lost, ironically, they lost a shootout game to Finland. That was their only blemish on the record with Mangiapane wearing Maple Leaf. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, we've talked in various venues about how damn good Mangiapane is at hockey, and I think in this market we've sort of joked that he might be the best player that no one's ever really talking about, and now I think the greater Canadian hockey world is starting to get their eyes open a bit towards him. So, I mean, pretty cool, and he's got a year left at 2.45 or 2.425 million. So I think Brad Treliving's to-do list, figuring out Gaudreau is probably number 1, and figuring out how to sign Mangiapane for forever is probably getting itself pretty high up the to-do list.
So we have got plenty with us on this Sunday afternoon, plenty on the live chat already. Jordan was first in, Garav, Ryan, Mike, Josh, Elias, Tyler, all of them in on the live chat right now. And Garav says, bet Treliving's wishing he extended Mangiapane earlier. They were in a tough spot going into the season, knowing that they had just signed Markstrom and knowing that they had just signed Tanev and they were tight on the cap. So signing Mangiapane long term was going to be a difficult endeavor for them this past offseason. But certainly, I think that they would admit now that if they could have done that and gotten him to 5 or 6 years, they probably would have liked to, because it's going to be a whole lot more expensive to do that this time around and to do that after this contract expires. We're brought to you by Deuce Vodka, Flames Nation Live on a Sunday afternoon with Pat Steinberg and Ryan Pike. Live right now, Andrew Mangiapane, MVP at the World Championships. Canada wins gold with a 3-2 overtime win over Finland, and that's a pretty cool off-season note for Flames fans. What does a next contract look like for Andrew Mangiapane then? Not to say the World Championships will have anything to do with it, and this is a tournament that it is not a best on best tournament, all that type of stuff, but he goes and represents Canada and does so very well. More importantly, he had himself another outstanding regular season. What does a next contract look like for Andrew Mangiapane, and what type of dollar figures are we talking about over 6 or 7 years?
Well, the folks over at Evolving Hockey have a contract projection tool, and just based on his NHL performance, their projection is 4 years and $4.5 million AAV for Mangiapane. So, in other words, he's probably looking at Rasmus Anderson money. And for what he does, and how good he is at even strength. I mean, the 2 best even strength Flames the last 2 years have been Mangiapane and Lindholm,
Yep.
and then there's a big gap between them and third place. Lindholm, I believe, is making $4.85 million. Lindholm plays on both sides of special teams. So does Mangiapane. Both those guys have shown that they can drive play, whether on the line together or on separate lines. And I think if you're the Flames, you look at some of those guys and go, okay, how can you build a team around guys like Lindholm and Mangiapane who can do it in all 3 zones? Because if you can use those 2 guys as sort of your heavy lifters and then surround them with some more, toolsy guys like, is Matthew Tkachuk a complete 200-foot player? I don't think he's a complete 200-foot player, but he's pretty good in the neutral and especially the offensive zone. So if you can have some guys who can allow your star players to be stars, like I don't think Lindholm's considered a star. Mangiapane is probably not considered a star, but I think they're the types of guys that you need to do the heavy lifting in order to let your stars be stars. And great, the Flames found Mangiapane in his 13th round of draft eligibility.
Yep.
That's not going to happen all the time. So when you do happen to, trip on your own feet and land on a winning lottery ticket, you got to cash it in. And for the Flames, I think cashing in would be basically begging Mangiapane to spend as long as he can stomach to spend in Calgary, and just throw a blank check at him and say, what'll it take? Because those are guys that you win with. So we'll see what happens. But you and I have discussed this quite a bit. This is gonna be a weird summer, man. Like, it's gonna be a weird summer. We're 7 weeks away from expansion. We're 8 weeks away from free agency. There's an entry draft in there. Probably will have a good indication of what Johnny Gaudreau's future wearing a flaming sea will look like by then. It's gonna be such a weird summer.
I just don't know why you wouldn't sign Mangiapane to, I don't know, a 6-year deal. Like what? He's 24 years old. Sign him through a few UFA years. Get him till he's 30, and then And if you had to go 6 times 5 for Andrew Mangiapane right now, I would do it heartbeat, no questions asked. Because
if you could 6 by 5, and he'd still be underpaid for a lot of the impacts he brings.
100% he would be, and I think offensively he's just getting started in a lot of ways. Like, I think over an 82 game season, if you top 6 for an 82 game season.
He reminds me of the way Backlund was, like, when Backlund started to be, like, quote unquote modern. Backlund was one of those guys that did so many little things that covered up for his teammates and made everyone on his line better. And Mangiapane is one of those guys. And it took I'm trying to work backwards to figure out how old Backlund is, because Backlund's in 06, and it took him like 6-7 years of being post draft to really find his legs. Mangiapane was drafted in his first year of draft eligibility was 2014, and it's 7 years out, and Mangiapane is just a possession beast. So I think again, those are the types of guys where guys that touch every part of the game, guys that sort of just work in any system you want to play him in. Just don't overthink it. Just throw a contract at him and figure it out. And especially Mangiapane, he had 2 fairly contentious negotiations with the Flames coming out of his entry level deal. Again, his entry level deal, not a lot of guys have entry level years the way Mangiapane did, where he went from being sort of a depth guy to being a pretty decent NHL player by the end of it. And so it was kind of difficult. I think it took until a couple days after fitness testing was over before they signed him after ZLC. And then the last one, he went to salary arb, and basically a couple days before, I think it was the day before his hearing was scheduled, they came to an agreement, which isn't atypical.
No, that's very normal.
Yeah, the nice thing about ARB is it puts a clock on it instead of, I think both sides after the previous contract negotiation were thinking, oh God, don't let this drag till September. So they figured out a way to not have it drag till September. And I don't think the Flames have any kind of stomach to have this drag any little more than it needs to. I think, like you and I think the challenge is, Are they going to sign Gaudreau long term? Are they going to make some trades that open up space? Are they going to potentially lose somebody with significant salary to Seattle? That could be a tongue twister right there. Significant salary to Seattle. But there's a lot of dominoes that have yet to fall that I think are just being set up right now.
So Mange is 25 now, which means he's got 2 years left before turn 25 in April. So he'll be unrestricted in 2 seasons, or eligible for unrestricted free agency. So any deal that you're going to sign him now has to be either a 1-year deal or a 3+ year deal. Going 2 makes no sense because you walk him right to unrestricted free agency. So if you're going to sign him again, you're going to want to, I guess in this case, he's got 1 year left on his deal. You're going to want to sign him to a 2-year, I guess a 2-year deal of work, right? Because that'll buy at least 1 year of unrestricted free agency. That's what you need to be thinking about now, is that at 25, he's a couple years away from being eligible for UFA. So you're going to want to now be talking about how many UFA years you're going to want to buy of him and how much of a premium that's going to be for each UFA year you buy. So that's going to be really interesting as well when you start to talk about what a potential extension might look like for Mangiapane. And now is probably the not the best time to, because right now everybody's buzzing about, hey, World Championship MVP. He's got all the leverage in the world, but come July 28th, when you're eligible to re-sign him, it's going to be really interesting to see how that works and if that's even a priority for the Flames, or if I just get it done now, because what if he goes out and scores 35 next year? That jacks him up that much more, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean the reason, if you're negotiating, if you're a team and you're negotiating with a player, you're, especially during the RFA years, you hammer them on money because you have a cap. Especially now there's a flat cap. But if coming out of his ELC, Mangiapane had played not even one full year in the NHL. He'd spent I think his best year was 2/3 of the years in the NHL. So if you wanted to say, I don't know what the hell he is, that would be fair. I think you can say, even if he's at that point, it was clear he was a pretty good, useful bottom six guy at the very least. You can say, don't know what he is yet. Let's not go long. Let's not give him a lot of money. Let's do a show me deal. And then he did a show me deal, and he showed them he's at the very least a pretty damn good middle six player. And then he signed this 2-year deal worth, I think, $2.425 million for 2 seasons. It expires next July 1st, and so the question was, okay, you're probably going to be a pretty good middle sixer, but you don't have a lot of sample size. Maybe you're going to fall back. I mean, this team has egg on their face from throwing a lot of money at guys who play with Backlund, guys who played with other good players who had, Lance Bowman is a good example. So they didn't skewer Lance Bowman on his extension. So they learned that lesson, and they sort of tend to be a little bit more pessimistic now.
Why was he the guy that got all of a sudden, like, Tree was like, no, I'm not gonna make this guy, Lance Boma, the absolute poster child for never gonna be able to do what he did again. Like, you know what? We'll give this guy all the money. I still can't wrap my head around that one. Anyway, I digress.
But
back to what you were saying.
But I think they learned that lesson. But the other lesson is, okay, when you have a guy who's you brought him through your system. He was a good AHLer. He was a good. You did all the steps with him that you wanted to do. He played most of the season on the first line this year. He was probably their best even strength player. He spent most of his year in the top 6, good chunk of this year in the first line. He's a really good hockey player. He's really good. Even if he, even if it does, he's still one of your 3, 4, 5 best skaters of any position. Just don't overthink it. Just go, great. This is what you hope your drafted players, your late round players. Hell, this is what you hope any player not drafted after the first round, or not drafted in the first round, turns into. I mean, great. This is how it's supposed to work. Your guys found someone who had a lot of value. You drafted him. You got him a sign. You put him through your system. He turned into exactly the type of player your system needs. So just don't overthink it. Just sign him.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, what do we got in the chat? A couple of other topics that have come up in the live chat. It's Flamesnation Live with Pat Steinberg and Ryan Pike on a Sunday afternoon. So we're talking lots about Andrew Mangiapane, World Championship MVP, eligible for a contract extension in about 7 weeks when free agency opens on July 28th. Article this week on The Nation about Sean Monahan potentially being connected to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and a couple people wondering if that's a trade that could happen. I definitely think Monahan's name is out there. I do think that they would move Monahan if they could find something for him. I don't think they're going to get a huge return for him. The place that I think is an interesting landing spot is Ottawa. I think that I think they've got the cap space to be able to do it. They've got the assets to be able to do it, and I think that they're a team that is willing to maybe take a buy low chance on a guy like Monahan and see if they can get him back to where he was before. Columbus is a similar situation. I could see that making sense. So Columbus, Ottawa, there's a couple of potential landing spots for Sean Monahan if indeed the Flames are able to find a trade partner.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Flames, I mean, you traded Sam Bennett for a second and a pretty decent prospect. And all due respect to Sam Bennett, Bennett doesn't have near the offensive chops that Sean Monahan has in the NHL. I mean, Sean Monahan has been playing hurt pretty much his entire career based on how he plays the game. He's one of those guys that he's always around the blue paint in the slot and in that, in the quote unquote high rent districts. And he's willing to do that and he gets beaten up a bit for it. But I don't think, if you're a team that you're just looking at how many goals he scored, how many games can we win with him, I think it's pretty easy if you're another team to talk yourself into Sean Monahan because he put up all these numbers despite being basically 2/3 scar tissue by the All-Star break. So if he can get any kind of luck with injuries and sort of avoid some of that, and if he can, maybe learn to pick his spots a bit better. I mean, put him in a different system, put him with a different coach, maybe put him with different line mates who can open up a little bit more room for him, and all of a sudden it's not out of the realm of possibility to think that his production can continue for a few more seasons at the very least. So I think there's tremendous value there potentially. So I have no idea. I think that for him, I think the 6.375 cap hit, it's palatable, but I think it also makes it a little bit tougher to move him in a flat cap. So maybe if you're the Flames, you need to take a pick. You take a pick and sort of a secondary roster player back just to make the money work. Maybe this is gonna be fascinating because this is a year where basically outside of Seattle, almost nobody has significant cap space, and everybody's got holes in their roster. And for the Flames, the nice thing is, Ottawa's looking for everything. Columbus is definitely looking for centers. There's definitely other teams that are looking for centers. Guys who score 20, 30 goals consistently, they tend to get you a decent return at the very least.
If you could get late first round or a second round pick and a prospect for Monahan and have the other team eat a good chunk of that cap hit, I think that you get that deal done if you're the Flames. We'll see if that's out there, but I do think Ottawa's a team that he played his junior hockey there, and I just think there's some potential for that to happen, and I think that if the Flames had traded Monahan 2 years ago, two off seasons ago, they would have gotten a massive haul for him. Well, his stock has fallen significantly since then on the trade market, but you can't be comparing your return to what you could have gotten 2 years ago. You have to still make a trade. And if it's going to be able to open up some cap space and also shake up your core, potentially help you maybe sign Gaudreau long term or something like that, I think it's something you absolutely have to focus on if you're the Calgary Flames. I'm not saying Monahan's the only guy that they should consider trading, but I do think if you can get he's the guy of this equation that I would be okay with if they went the pick and prospect route and didn't bring back an NHL player right now. And maybe that allows them to go chase in free agency. Maybe that allows them to elevate. Maybe you're talking about Lindholm, Backlund now as your top two centers, and you're backfilling number 3 and 4. Maybe you're talking about moving Dylan Dubé to the middle. I know that's something Daryl Sutter has talked about. It's the other thing that I'm really interested about this team this offseason and just doing some digging. I do think this is going to be a team that's going to be try to be younger in their depth roles. Like I think if your name is Ruzicka or Godin or Valimaki or Mackey, I think you're going to be looking at more chance to play regular minutes this year because I don't think they're Nordstrom's already gone. As we reported that at Flames Nation this week, he's off to CSKA Moscow in the KHL. I don't think Ryan's coming back. I don't think Nesterov's coming back. There's a lot of players that outside of the one UFA they have to sign to meet expansion requirements, and maybe Michael Stone, I don't think that this list of UFAs is going to be returned. And I think there's going to be some spots open. And whether it's Pelche, Zeri, whether it's God and Rosichka, I think there's going to be some opportunities. And I think that's really important for this organization. It might make you quote unquote less good to start the season. There might be more growing pains because you're not talking about veterans, but I think that it would add some excitement if you're a fan, and also from an organizational standpoint, it'll give you more opportunity to do things and learn about your team and grow your team. And I think if you I worry about the team bringing back veterans, and they can say all they want, we're still going to let the young guys play, but when you've got those veterans, the temptation is always going to be there to play those guys over a guy who doesn't have as much NHL experience.
I mean, we've seen in past years where the Flames have sort of brought in those sort of. We saw at the beginning of Treliving's tenure here, where you're spending a third round pick on Brandon Bollig. Why the hell are you doing that? Well, you're doing that because you're just starting a rebuild. You need NHL bodies to fill in holes, and you don't want the kids you do have getting caved in every night. But if you're the Flames now, if you look at up and down, like this year they went the bargain bin route because of the cap, and it didn't quite work out. Almost all of them sort of fell below or slightly at expectations. None of them really overperformed, but that was because I think they wanted to give their kids a little bit more time to sort of get there. This year, I mean, you talk about role players. Jacob Pelche is probably my favorite person in the organization right now to watch play hockey, because he gets it. We saw him at the World Juniors where he was Mr. Utility. Coach said, "Hey, we need you to kill penalties." He was out killing penalties. "Hey, we need you to, be on the forecheck." He was there in the forecheck. "Hey, we need you. We have an injury. We need you to fill in the top six." He filled in the top six. He has that intangible where he can just hustle and read and react, and he doesn't really do a lot of paralysis by analysis. He just sort of just jumps in, and he's the type of player I think if you're Daryl Sutter, maybe instead of having a bunch of veteran depth guys who have their habits and have their idea of what they are as a pro, maybe having the ability for Daryl to, for lack of a better term, program some kids who are sort of blank slates at the pro level. I mean, if you want a guy to be able to teach you how to play 300-foot hard-nosed hockey, maybe you do want Pelche being mentored by Sutter and these guys for the year. And same with Connor Zary. I think those two guys could be really in the mix for positions. I think it'll probably be easier to fit in. I think because Pelche has played all over the place and is arguably a little bit more versatile than Zary is, and a little bit older than Zary, I think Pelche has probably a slightly better chance at playing NHL games this year. But I think both of them will probably play the games this year, because I don't think they're going to go back to the tried and true of whatever. Find whatever guy, 28-year-old with who are willing to come in for a league minimum deal. I think they're going to be a lot more strategic about the kind of guys they bring in, because I think they don't want to block these kids anymore. I think they missed the kind of piss and vinegar and excitement that they get from having guys in their first, second, third year in the league. Really gives you especially during those dog days of the summer. I mean, people, if you think you're kind of burnt out watching 370 in the regular season, it's a Wednesday against the Minnesota Wild, and you are looking for reasons to be excited about the game. There's times in the season where the NHL season's kind of dragging the players too, and having a kid who can bring you a little bit of extra oomph on those nights can make the difference between losing 2-1 or winning 2-1. So why not try it?
By the way, we were all hoping on, was it Wednesday? Wednesday, the draft lottery? We were all hoping on Wednesday that maybe the Flames would cash in on that 2% chance and win. They didn't. They'll draft number 12 overall, so we know where the Flames will be drafting in the first round, and then they'll draft with the 13th pick in the subsequent rounds, because the reason they're drafting 12th is Arizona forfeits. So Arizona does not have their first round pick this year, and that's why Calgary will draft number 12. Lots of good players there. Our next Flames Nation Live will maybe talk about the prospect. I see a lot of guys in the chat talking about, maybe the Flames trade that first round pick this year because it's a weird draft year. I don't know if I'm on board with that, but we'll see. I think they need more prospects in the organization because cupboards are all of a sudden pretty empty again. But that's a conversation for
And
another week.
especially if you're going to be like, let's be blunt, the if you're looking for guys who can potentially be NHL difference makers in the system, it's basically Wolfman, bunch of question marks. So if you're going to be
Yep.
graduating potentially one of Zary or Pelche to the NHL as early as the fall, you're going to want to have some guys behind them to sort of fill in those gaps a bit.
He's Pike. I'm Steinberg. This is Flames Nation Live, brought to you by our friends at Deuce Vodka. Check them out wherever fine spirits are sold across Alberta. If your local liquor store is not carrying Deuce Vodka, make sure that they are. Pike, we've got tons of coverage of the draft, free agency. The nations are going to be rolling for the next number of weeks. Tell us what's coming up at Flames Nation.
Well, speaking of, you and I were talking, last week a bit about, the prices for expansion draft stuff. What it'll cost to, keep Giordano. Tomorrow morning, I posed a question: what's more valuable for the Flames this season? Is it keeping some veteran leaders, or is it potentially freeing up some cap space? Because let's just say Milan Lucic gets claimed by Seattle, all of a sudden, instead of having to white knuckle it through an offseason of trying to keep your key guys together, you have a lot more breathing room, and you have a lot more breathing room to be creative in terms of trades, signings, whatever. So I'd posit, what would the price be to open up some cap space, and would it be worth losing a Giordano or a Lucic if it potentially unshackles you out of salary cap?
Yep.
That and all kinds of free agency trade targets, free agency targets. Undoubtedly, two or three more Flames players will sign in Europe at some point next week at this rate. So now the Worlds are over, guys, European teams start their camps in about 3 weeks. So we're going to see probably a flurry. If we're going to see, a bunch of guys sign in Europe, it's going to be happening over the next 2-3 weeks. So it's going to be kind of noisy, I think.
Check out Pike. Check out Steinberg on the social medias if you would like. Check out flamesnation.ca for daily, and we mean daily content on the Calgary Flames. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you next week for Deuce Vodka. This has been Flames Nation Live. Thanks for watching. Be kind, stay safe, and we'll talk to you in a few days on Flames Nation Live. Bye, all.